But I find the position really great. I
Absolutely.
think it's great that it's not in the middle of the camera, it's on the side, because it allows you to literally kind of look to, like you still, with your other eye, you can look at your subject or whatever you're filming while you're using that EVF. And that's so useful, because with other traditional mirrorless cameras, it's just like in the middle and you're kind of glancing over the lens, which is not great.
What's new in filmmaking technology this week? News, reviews, education, insights, opinions, and ideas from the CineD newsroom with Mino Leitner and Johnnie Bahiri. This is Focus Check, the weekly Cinetech podcast.
Welcome to CineD Focus Check episode 66. It's release date of a new Sony camera, Johnnie.
I know, Nino. Sleepless nights, lot of work for both of us just to get ready and be prepared.
So is this a camera we've been waiting for?
Personally, for me, yes. But I will explain before everybody jumps on me and say, hey, but, we want to concentrate on what it has and not what really is missing, because otherwise, you know.
Well, let's start. We will start with the FX2, which is all the hype this week, of course. And then we'll talk about a couple of other things. We have to talk about Google DeepMind Veo 3, their incredibly convincing AI video generator, which is scary. We have to talk about that, and also the implications, of course. We'll also talk about, which is related to that, like famous filmmakers like Darren Aronofsky partnering with Google, doing generative AI short film initiative. We'll talk about an update in terms of gear news, a little bit more, mellow news. RØDE released a update for the wireless micro audio unit, which is now connecting directly to the phone without a receiver, which is kind of cool for creators, I think. We'll talk about a poll that we ran. We asked people, what is the most innovative camera brand? I mean, it's still running. You can still vote. But we'll talk about, some of the results and what we think they mean. We'll mention the Hollyland LARK Max 2, a really innovative new wireless audio setup, which has wireless audio monitoring, which is new, and also up to 4 senders, 4 transmitters. That's with great. 1 receiver. We'll talk about Mandy Walker ASC making history as the ASC's first female president, which is incredible. We'll mention about a pro tip that we have for our database tool, where you can actually find out how much any sensor crops, like any camera crops, when you change the format inside your camera. We highlighted this in an article because I think a lot of people don't realize we have this. So we all know the problem, what happens when you are actually changing the format or frame rate in your camera. Sometimes cameras crop, and it's just sometimes you don't know what's happening, right? You don't remember that for all the cameras. So we have a tool for that, and we'll show you how that works. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I think that's enough to talk about. There's other small news, but we'll leave them out. I think we should start with the FX2. So Sony Cinema camera, a new one, which the most apparent change, of course, we finally have a built-in viewfinder.
That's right. And of course, as we said before, it will be too easy to say, hey, it's 2025, why it doesn't have internal ProRes recording, or why it cannot record through USB-C to external SSD, and so on. But we are not here already to talk about what the camera originally cannot do. But I think it's important to say what it can do, who is it for, and highlight. Of course, it has some downsides that we're going to, but the downsides are part of the specifications. So first of all, as you just mentioned, the EVF, which is really great. I think both of us and probably so many other people were asking Sony to come up with a solution which is usable, at least for us. LCD screen is not enough. It's kind of we're missing one point of contact with the camera, and also all about exposure. So personally, this EVF is really reconnecting me back to the Sony FX line of cameras, compact cinema line cameras, and I like it.
And also, I mean, we have to point out that, of course, we have the Alpha series with built-in viewfinders, but you cannot tilt them. You are always kind of stuck. You're not flexible. You use it like a photo camera, of course. and it's always kind of, you look straight into the camera, like with most, or actually all other mirrorless cameras in the market. But this one, as far as I remember, I don't know of any other camera in this size.
But you have the GFX 100. Yeah. There's like a detachable.
Okay, but in this size, I don't recall any other camera having a tiltable EVF like that.
It's really great. Just please make sure if you're working with a wireless solution, if you have the receiver here, that means you will not be really able to tilt it. But hey, that's the price to pay. And this is fine. What else? So first of all, this camera is really a hybrid camera. That's how Sony will market it, and that's how we also think that it's the right way to expose it. It has a 33 megapixel sensor. That means that also if you are a photographer, you probably will be really happy. Meaning if you are printing large or if you need the flexibility, Sony also added a new button here. There's a new switch, movie and still, so it's very easy. There is also in the menu now, it's very easy to access log, photographer. I mean, you can let's say it differently. You can shoot in RAW in log picture profile. And that means that you can really match photos and videos with the same LUT. So it's rather easy, and I really like what they did here. This function is not available yet to develop, meaning there is no tool in the market. So please, if you have you will have the camera, please use JPEG or HIEF. Am I
HIEF? Yeah.
HIEF, yeah. That's for now. Later, DaVinci Resolve will be the first one to actually support the photo RAW development, which is an interesting choice from Sony, because we know DaVinci Resolve is mainly for editing.
Well, I think we should mention why. I mean, you don't really need log in photos. You don't need it because it has all a lot more bit depth than video. But if you're shooting both photos and video, it was difficult to kind of develop both the video and the photo in the same way so they would actually look the same way. So if you're, like you said, a hybrid shooter, and you really are going to an event or whatever, or a production, and you need to take both the photos and the videos, it wasn't actually that easy to kind of do the whole color grading in a way that it will look alike at the end. And because you shoot video in log, in S-Log3, and now you can do this with photos too. I mean, this is actually not the first camera that can do this, but it's the first camera that has it easily accessible.
From Sony, yeah.
From Sony, where you don't have to really do a lot of settings in the menus. It's just like, it's there and you can do it. And of course, I mean, there's also ways to apply LUTs to stills images. So you could do kind of the same process, yeah. The
other thing, what they have, and it's really nice, they have a new home button, and this button is actually will bring you, they call it the big 6. So you will have 6 features, presets here that you can, like shutter angle, white balance, and so ISO and so on. But you can also change those. So it really depends what you prefer to have. Much like a Q button in some cameras, but also I think this feature comes from the higher end of Sony cameras. I think both the Venice and the Burano has it. So it's like a mini.
It's also on the I think it's on the FX6 too, since one of the last firmware updates. So it's just, like more intuitively kind of have a flexible menu through the touchscreen.
Yeah, that's nice. And also when it comes to autofocus, this camera now has a dedicated AI chip for enhanced autofocus. But the other thing which is quite nice, sometimes when you're shooting multiple subjects, people, trains, aeroplanes, animals, and what's on, you always have to go to the menu in order to choose what, like how do you want the autofocus to behave. And now you have an auto mode. I put it on auto, and in all honesty, it really worked flawlessly. Regardless if I was filming people, dogs, cats, and so on, it was always nailing the focus. Because I was also doing a mini documentary, like normally we do, we try to do this type of test, let's call it. In the interview, hopefully we'll see, with a very nice guy by the name Thanos, who is running together with his family a Greek restaurant here in Vienna. A Greek taverna. I said restaurant, taverna. And the whole interview, I left the autofocus on, and really, it was really working very well, like we expect from Sony. No problems here. Yeah, and when it comes to pricing, I think there were a lot of, I was concerned about the price of this camera, especially with the tariffs and everything. So this is the final price, and whatever tariffs, it's already included, and that will be $2,699.99, 2,700, some will argue, for the body only. And if you want, there's also an XLR handle. This is not a new one.
Yeah, this one already existed for the FX3.
That's right. And then if you decide to buy this for more like audio flexibility, it will be 3,100. So altogether, this camera will be like what, 1,000? Like if I compare it to the FX3, I did the calculation. It will be $1,200 cheaper than the FX3.
Yeah, I mean, because you mentioned the FX3, of course, before this camera was released, there have been a lot of rumors. A lot of people have been kind of waiting for an FX3 or hoping for an FX3 successor. But I think Sony has made it very clear by the naming that FX2 is a different...
It's below.
It's below, and it's simply a different beast with different target audience. And I think we should dive into that a little bit. You pointed out the higher resolution sensor. I mean, the FX3... just like the A7S3, which is kind of like the same interior in terms of like sensor, and also the FX6, it was a 12 megapixel camera.
It was based on the A7S3, basically.
Exactly. It's the same sensor, and that means this is not enough resolution to do a crop 4K. So one of the actually few downsides of those cameras, the FX3, the FX6, A7S3 was always that you cannot do a APS-C or Super 35mm crop with 4K, which is a problem if you use, lenses that are only covering Super 35, or you use a PL adapter. Most PL lenses are only covering Super 35, and then you kind of were forced to, use full HD,
lens, yeah, or full HD or full frame lenses.
Yeah, so that was a problem, and that actually was the only advantage of the whole FX line from, the now discontinued FX9. I had a 6K sensor, so this was able to crop in 4K. Now this one is able to do that because mathematically it means that a 4K Super 35 crop will be from a 4.6K image. Now it will only be saved as a 4K file. It's not going to be, but it's going to be oversampled full frame. So theoretically, of course, even the full frame image, because the sensor is higher resolution, should look better. Should be sharper in this camera.
But there is also a downside here, and the downside is that the camera can, if you move from 25p to 50 or 60p, you can shoot only in Super 35, and this is a bit of a letdown. I think I understand if there's a hardware limitation, okay. But I would have expected Sony to actually consider and maybe allow people, maybe with future firmware upgrades, unless they're really cannibalizing the FX3. Yeah, that's a bit of a pity. We know that many people are using those for wedding realities and so on. And some of those broadcasters are still demanding 50 or 60p. For us personally, maybe it's not really interfering with our work. We are usually shooting in 25p. But the other thing is, if you want true 24p, you can only do this in 4K DCI.
Yeah, but that's the 24p standard, which is only actually not the 23.98.
Sure,
which is UHD.
Sure, but if you want to work, and we will talk in a second about working with anamorphic lenses, but if you want to work with an anamorphic lens on this camera, then you don't really need a DCI. You want to work on Ultra HD, and that's a pity because in Ultra HD you simply can't tune the camera on 24p, so only 24 or 20 or 50 and such on.
So yeah, no 50p or 60p using the full sensor width. It's cropped, but also no 4K 120, which we had in the FX6 and the FX3. So the high speed is limited, and this is where we see. I mean, those two things are the major differences between the FX3 and FX2, and I think that's why they probably decided to put it below the FX3 and not, make this a successor, because of course it has obvious advantages like the higher resolution and the tiltable EVF, which actually, by the way, I don't know, I mean, you worked with it a lot more, but I find the position really great. I think it's great that it's not in the middle of the camera, it's on the side, because it allows you to literally kind of look to, like you still, with your other eye, you can look at your subject or whatever you're filming while you're using that EVF, and that's so useful, because with other traditional mirrorless cameras, it's just like in the middle and you're kind of glancing over the lens, which is not great.
It is really perfect here. The only thing that it does, it's cannibalizing some of the attachment points. If you compare it to the FX30 or FX3, which they have the same body, a camera body, we are losing here a few of those. And I understand, because the EVF is here. So if you're working with rig or whatever, just you should know.
Yeah. I mean, what's also new, by the way, is that the microphone in and the headphone out are actually not protected by a flap. So it's kind of like easily...
Well, I found it very easy to work like this. I didn't have to struggle and fight against rubbers. Of course, we will know if there are any consequences or long-term consequences if the camera is working with a bit of a kind of severe conditions.
I think they did a smart job at putting the HDMI, the full-size HDMI on top here, because it's not really interfering with your monitor, right?
That's right.
That's a really good position. I mean, I wish it had more kind of tiltable angles and more flexibility in terms of like where you can put that monitor. Like we see from some other manufacturers, it's just like more is possible, but still, I mean, that makes the mechanism more complicated and it makes it a little bit more bulky, I guess. But the position of the HDMI connector is great.
Yeah. Also nice. Finally, we have. I just will close this. Finally, we have 2 attachment points for the tripod, and that's priceless. I mean, this is so obvious, but now we have it. It's a big advantage. On the other hand, I like to work with anamorphic lenses, and I wanted to give a bit of a different look. And I chose Blazer. I think they are one of the best when it comes to look versus the value for money. Originally, I was waiting for the Mantis to come. It's 1.33 squeeze mode, but those did not arrive in the office in time. So I used the Apex. And of course, the Apex are originally made for Super 35. And before everybody jumps and say, hey, what are you doing? Well, I literally used the clear zoom and I cropped a little bit, like 1.2, quite easy to do this. By doing so, I achieved actually that maybe the soft edges of the lens are kind of gone out of the way. And of course, I gained working with the autofocus, which was really a breeze. It's so easy to work. The thing is, this camera, like the FX3 and the FX30, you can de-squeeze in the display, like in your viewfinder or monitor. The problem is when you de-squeeze in camera, you are losing the stabilization system and you're losing autofocus. So for me, that was not an option. Then I kind of decided to keep it off, like not to de-squeeze in camera, and then I gained the stabilization. But of course, I had to keep the camera all the time balanced. Otherwise, the image will be skewed. So I had
because the image stabilization is working against you then, or
yeah. Well, like if you take other brands like Panasonic, for example, you have a dedicated IBIS functionality when you work with anamorphic lenses. Yeah, so it's here you simply don't have it. That's probably why it's disabled. But I'm just saying, it's a pity. At least from the autofocus performance, there are new cameras in the market that are doing anamorphic autofocus. It will be nice if Sony can consider at least to enable the autofocus if you work with the squeeze mode, in the display. Yeah. What else did I want to say about this camera? So all in all, when it comes to card slots, it has 2 card slots. One is actually both of them can accommodate SD cards, but only one can take Type A, CFX Type A card. And we talked to Sony about this. We just want to know why. And basically the answer was for the target audience, for these cameras is aiming for, 1 slot is probably enough. I think it's also worth mentioning that we are having our own branded Type R, CF Express Type R A cards. We do this in cooperation with Angelbird, and those cards that we are promoting are really in a special price. So I think we will also have a link in the show notes if people are interested to get those cards. It would be nice.
Still a limited edition, but they are available in 2 different sizes. Now, in general, I think it's never great to lose a feature. On the other hand, I understand why they left it out, because
Which feature?
The second CF Express Type A card. Honestly, I work a lot with the FX line cameras or the A7S III, and I hardly need the second slot. It's just simply because these CF Express Type A cards, like ours, for example, are now so affordable. Even in the bigger sizes, you have a 330 gigabyte card, and you can record in the highest internal codec for hours and hours and hours. So you don't really need the second one unless you really want dual slot recording for an instant backup or something like that. Also, you have to consider whether you really always need. I mean, I personally always use CF Express Type A cards because I don't want to be limited in terms of
functionality,
frame rates and stuff. Because you, for example, with the FX3 and FX6, you need it for the 4K 120 or 4K 100. I wonder what the limitations will be with SD cards in this one, because it doesn't have this feature. But you can use SD cards if it will work for the normal thing. And that actually leads me to the next thing. Of course, the internal codecs, they haven't changed, right? We are still
same.
This is a 10-bit 422 camera. It can output, of course, RAW via the HDMI to an external recorder, like all of them do now. But in terms of internal recording, we're still in the same XAVCI ecosystem that we've had for many years now from Sony.
Yeah. A small anecdote, a really funny story, because when you look through the menus, suddenly you see ND filter. And of course, I was like, what's going on? ND filter in this camera. But it turned out to be, there is no ND filter here. But what you can do, if you're working with multiple cameras, for example, and you want to assign in the metadata which ND filter you've been working with, you can literally choose it, and then when you go through the editing process, maybe it's easier to identify what you've been working with. Of course, if you're an independent filmmaker,
but it's not built in; it's just in front of your lens, and you have to.
No, of course. But if you are an independent filmmaker and you're working a lot with a variable, and this feature, of course, is not useful. But if you're working properly with Matbox or putting the whatever strength of ND filter, that might be interesting for you to explore.
Explain me one thing about the autofocus, because I still haven't quite understood it. So there's all these different modes. Over the years, Sony added more and more modes for different subjects. So there was humans and animals first, and then they added birds, because they
Trains, aeroplanes,
birds are not animals for Sony. I'm just kidding, but it's a specific one for birds, trains, planes, all of that. And now you say you don't really need to set this anymore. I just wonder, what does it focus on if I have multiple different things in the shot? Because the whole point is, like, if you're train spotting, for example, and really want to film trains, you don't want it to focus on anything else other than the train that's coming into your shot. But then if you have it on auto to select all of those, I mean, it's kind of you're losing the point of this, right? Because then it will just focus on whatever is more dominant in the frame.
Well, 2 things. First of all, just frame accordingly. That's one thing to avoid. Wait. Or just switch back to the manual possibility. But I can tell you that I was filming a person with his dog. So it was so easy for me to move from the person, from his face, to his pet, and I was in focus. Otherwise, there would have been a risk of losing the focus. If, for example, if I left it on human, when it comes to the dog, maybe the camera will not recognize it the way it should. So I'm just saying.
Okay, but that wasn't the mode to just simply disable this subject recognition before, because that's exactly.
It's not a matter of disabling. You want to use it. It's a feature that works well.
No, but I mean, I have enabled autofocus, but not using the subject tracking.
I mean, there is a off position here, but I think the AI the focus recognition.
To test this,
yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Anything else? I mean, guys, we will be very happy to hear your thoughts about this entry-level cinema line camera from Sony. Do you think the price is justified, the $2,700? Do you see yourself buying something like this. I can tell again personally, this is now my favorite camera in the line, in the Cine line, the compact Cine line, mostly because of the EVF. Otherwise, I always kind of felt that I know some productions did really big and nice things with the FX3, but somehow when I was shooting documentaries, I felt always, what's the point of having such a small camera and then put a big monitor on top? That was really contradicting, and now I feel much more comfortable.
Now it's really possible to stay small with this camera without adding anything in addition, I guess.
That's right.
If they introduce more D-squeeze modes, and maybe what you ask for in terms of anamorphics, but at least for spherical lenses, of course, it's kind of a complete package.
Of course, if you feel a bit limited, you can, again, it's attaching another thing here, but you can use the app. Sony has an app, and through the app, you can look at the frame itself, and then you can squeeze accordingly. But I really hope, and I really don't understand in general this limitation. I guess it's a technical challenge. 1.5 and 1.6 and 1.8 anamorphic lenses are so popular now. I really don't understand why it's so difficult to implement it. But
maybe it's just popular in our world. Maybe we think that, but in terms of percentage, we don't know. I mean, maybe it's just, like 1% of all people actually use anamorphic lenses. I don't know. Well, it might be a perception.
The 1.3, of course, makes sense because there is no open gate in all of those compact cameras. Actually, some of the higher end Sony also, I think the Burano I can't remember.
It doesn't have open gate.
Open gate, yeah. So I'm just saying
full resolution.
Yeah. So if you work on the 16:9 portion of the sensor, 133 of course makes sense. Yeah, I understand. But
if you want to stay really small, maybe you want to just show this Sony lens. I mean, that's that's a one that they also is not so old. It was introduced a while ago.
No, but it's quite nice.
2450 is a very sharp lens.
f2.8 throughout the range. Very easy to use.
Very, very compact unit to use like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. So if you're one of those people that are really concerned to come on set with a photo camera that the production will suspect that their cousins also have the same one and say, hey, are you coming to shoot with something that I have? Well, now you have a camera with a badge, cinema line. So just show this. I'm sure everybody will be relaxed, and I guess you will feel much more
I think those times are
comfortable.
changing. I'm very surprised actually that Sony decided to add a viewfinder on this, because we've heard many times that actually we wanted it, but a lot of people always said like the younger generation is not actually using viewfinders as much because they're really used to using the screens on cameras, and the success of the FX3, which is a really successful camera, proves that they might be right. Like it really sold really, really well, and I think it's still selling really well. And apparently, a lot of people didn't end up missing it. Now, it's nice to have this segmentation. I think if this camera came out without the viewfinder and just everything else, I think it would not be enough to differentiate between these people. But now you really have a choice. You get a camera with very few downsides unless you really need, like 50, 60p or high frame rate. But other than that, I don't think you see there's much downsides here. Now, in terms of the price, we know that, of course, the price for this camera, like anything else now in America, is really affected by those tariffs. And they were probably aiming for something lower. We will still, at the time of recording, we actually don't know the euro price. So we see with a lot of other new products actually that they are significantly cheaper in Europe now. So let's see how it is with this camera. At the time, when you see this, you will know, right? But that's just, like we know that this is, the dollar price is of course affected by the tariffs.
Soon we're going to have tourists coming to Europe to shop from the US. If you do so, please come and visit us in Vienna. It would be nice to say hi in person. Okay, Nino, I think we covered most of it. And shall we move on or
Let's
anything
move on.
else?
We'll be back after this message from our sponsor.
1 Minute Tips by Fujifilm and CineD, another part of our Film Set Roles series. Let's talk about the production assistant, or PA, the entry point for a lot of people trying to gain a career in film. PAs are the backbone of any set, handling a wide variety of tasks, locking up locations, running paperwork, managing radios, grabbing that much needed morning and afternoon coffee. It might seem like small stuff, but keeping the set flowing smoothly is critical. Although PAs mainly answer to their respective production department on set, in the office, or in post, they get the benefit of interfacing with many departments every day. So remember to absorb and learn as much as you can in that position. For anyone starting their career in the industry as a PA, remember to stay proactive, attentive, and always ready to help. That's how you build trust and move up in the industry. Everyone starts somewhere, and many people's career began by being a great PA. Stay tuned for more film role breakdowns. 1 minute tips. Until next time.
And now back to the show. Good. We should also mention the other big news of last week, I guess, was which completely different. You know, like we have a new camera now. Let's talk about not cameras. Google announced Veo 3, their new video generating model. Now, we've seen a lot of those models come out over the last years. There's Runway ML, there is Sora from OpenAI, which is also getting better and better and more convincing. What we haven't seen so far, well, first of all, the video quality is increasing with each one of them. You know, like where the first ones, I mean, there's this famous video of Will Smith eating spaghetti. Have you seen that?
Yeah, that's a very long time ago.
But they kind of like used every new model to show him again eating spaghetti.
Oh, yeah.
He's very convincingly eating spaghetti with Veo 3, I have to say, and it doesn't look like
No 6 fingers anymore?
no cartoonish face anymore. It's crazy. But what's also crazy is that this Veo 3 is also generating audio to the video. And I have to say, you know, we might not have to actually cover trade shows anymore in the future, because if you look at this,
welcome to a non-existent car show. Let's see some opinions.
You know, a lot of people are already testing it and just playing around with it. Somebody made a car show video of interviews, non-existing car show, and it looks very similar to, of course, a trade show video that we shoot. And like, if you see that without any context, you would definitely 100% think it's real, right? There's very few things that are not realistic about this.
Range is only going to get better. Sorry.
We don't want to drive gas cars anymore.
Yeah, no more gas cars.
It's incredible, and it comes with audio. I mean, it's even the audio, like even how the audio is treated, how the limit. It even simulates the limiter on the microphone, where when a person is not talking, you have more background noise on this video. Right?
I try to explain my kids that those people actually do not exist.
You show them?
Yeah, I showed, because also to my wife. First of all, she was very happy. First, she thought we really don't have to cover shows anymore. That means be more at home. But jokes aside, this is so realistic for me. And again, I think by demonstrating this video and other videos too, it's very sad and very painful to say, but the segment of commercials or shooting commercials for television will never be the same again. I mean, when you look at some of the creative stuff that people are literally prompting, it's literally unbelievable.
And we saw one of the things, not even just the photorealism, but also you see already stories. People are making real short films, and you see consistency in the characters, which was one of the big things we talked about a long time ago, where it was very hard to recreate the same character again in a different shot. This seems to be solved in a sense that now there is consistency to these things, and it's absolutely mind-boggling what's possible now.
So regardless to us reporting about this, yes or no, it doesn't matter. The world move on. This technology will only get better, and I really hope that we are all here on the same page, understanding what is about to fall on our heads.
Well, I think you have to deal with this. If you're in video production, you have to educate yourself about this. I know we are all upset about it. We're all upset about it that it's trained on our videos from the internet and so on. But there's unfortunately, it's like you can't stop this train anymore. There seems to be no significant legal attempts whatsoever to stop this, in terms of kind of like, I don't see any of the big movie studios suing any of the big tech companies for, you know, like stealing their content or whatever. Whereas the music industry very much, you know, like fights against these things. We talked about before this Udio and other websites being sued by the music industry for the exact same reasons. But for some reason, the movie industry doesn't seem to care. They probably see more potential than danger here. Now, of course, I mean, immediately a lot of, I think the first field that will be affected is visual effects. I think VFX will be very, very difficult in the future to, justify like expensive VFX on actual word shoots. I think the people who will be winning in this in the short term will be filmmakers like us that are really taking this seriously and kind of putting their fear aside, but applying this to actual footage, right? Imagine just shooting something and already thinking about in the production of how you can utilize this to enhance your shooting, not to replace your creativity, but really enhance your shooting and come up with something innovative. And I think this is the tipping point. Veo 3 is the tipping point, and we will now see productions, commercial productions in all kinds of flavors flooding channels. And of course, the whole topic of fake news and you can't trust video anymore is a whole different saga. But even if we just talk about what you mentioned, the commercial productions, this is for me the absolute tipping point. That now a lot of those things are not justifiable anymore. The big budgets for some commercials, whether we like it or not, that's the reality right now.
But that's why we really, if I was at the beginning of my filmmaking career, I would definitely focus on shooting elements that are real people, in the sense that you need the emotions. Weddings, it's one thing. Divorces, no, I'm joking. And also documentaries. Those things you can't, it doesn't matter how good the AI will be, if you want to do a real documentary, you will still need real people telling their stories. Otherwise, it's not a documentary anymore. That's why, that's what I would have done. I would have then concentrate on those subjects.
I wonder what will happen to, the real shoots, because like if you think ahead a little bit, we see a pushback against AI from not just our community. Luckily, I think if you just look at comments on Instagram, you follow, for example, a channel that talks about AI advances and so on, specifically image generation, for example, and then you look at the comments, you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comments of people who are appalled by kind of the fakery. And it's not just us creatives who seem to be, like appalled by that.
Of course, that's beyond this industry. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think what this might lead to is that we know exactly that kind of this mass media kind of stuff. If we talk about, cheaply produced television series, there is probably no reason anymore for them to shoot that in real, like soap opera kind of stuff. This would be probably auto-generated in the future. All that kind of stuff that's kind of like, like a fast food almost, like nothing that's, will, go into a movie history, something that's just filling the screens kind of on the streaming platforms and also on broadcasters actually that are their budgets are shrinking all the time. So I think this will happen, but that also means that there will be a room for kind of almost like boutique productions. And I think anything real in terms of course, documentaries have to be real, but even fictional productions will become boutique productions, like almost like it's something that people will actively look out for. They will want to know that what they're watching is real and not watch the other stuff. I'm not talking about everybody, like my grandmother won't even know the difference. I mean, she's not alive anymore, but if she was, but you know what I mean? It's like a lot of people will actively look out for it, because I think we are only months away from probably a separate category on Netflix, which is like AI generated movies or series or whatever. This will happen, and it will be more and more and more and more. And then people will there will be this other wave of people being like, no, I want to see only the real stuff. And then it will have to have a sticker on it, because you will not be able to discern what's real and what isn't.
So the sticker will be a real stuff or AI stuff?
Both. But I think, like when it's unfortunately in a couple of years from now, the majority of imagery we will see online will be artificially generated for sure, because that's actually leading me into the next subject, which is let me just
this interview.
Well, no, because we also reported about Adobe. Now, Adobe stock, the stock website where you can sell or buy, depending on which side you're on, images, like stock images, and of course stock footage. A guy in Germany made an analysis over a long period of time, diving into Adobe stock, the website, and just finding out how much of the content that they have there is AI generated. And he found out, he kind of tracked it, because there's like a way of searching for AI stuff, and he kept searching, like for AI generated content, and he was comparing to the real stuff. And we're talking just about the stock photos for now. And he found out that now we are kind of like 50-50. There's already half of all the content that you have on Adobe stock is AI generated. And you know what that means? That also means that people buying those photos, using them for editorial, using them for commercial purposes, sometimes might not even know or check, because of course those things are labeled. But, you really have to look for that. If you just look for, people sitting at the conference table, and then you choose the first image that comes up or the fifth image that comes up and buy that and license that in your Adobe stock subscription, you don't even check if it's real or not, because you assume it is real. You use it in your production, but it's fake.
Innocent question. Why do they allow this?
I think they had to almost allow it because it's become impossible for them to tell the difference. That's my assumption.
No, I mean, maybe it's okay to have a dedicated section for AI.
There is a section,
but why would I want to buy AI photo? Even as an editorial, I mean, a stage photo, I understand.
It's almost making itself irrelevant, because you don't need to buy those things anymore. If you use an image generator, you can just tell it exactly what you want. But of course, I guess there's people who have corporate accounts with Adobe stock for years, and it's easier for them to do it like that. To prompt and write a prompt to get what you want, also you need a little bit of experience. It's not like
for sure.
But if you don't know how to do that and you're more old school, you just want to select an image, that's why you still use this. But I don't know why they allow it. I guess it's simply a way of giving up, because they don't have a chance to kind of discern what's real and what isn't.
Cool, it's not. But anyway.
Yeah, but that's and that's just a sign of things to come. Of course, what's going to happen to the video world as well. But that we also see, and we know that there is this pushback against AI also from Hollywood and big productions and so on, but more from the creatives, not so much from the producers. However, that is also changing. Not that everybody will be, embracing it, but I think it's slowly changing, because people are realizing that they can't stop it. And we have, really renowned directors now. Darren Aronofsky, for example, is partnering even directly with Google DeepMind on a generative AI short film initiative. And as a, kind of like centerpiece of that, they even released like a short film that is partly real shots and partly AI generated. And they say, for example, they are showing here a baby inside the womb and how the cells are developing. And they're pointing out how difficult it would have been to actually do this with visual effects, right? And this is a scene here, to show an unborn baby inside the female body. It's just very, very, this would be CGI, it would be 3D animation, a lot of things that would be extremely difficult to make.
Think about all of those historical series or whatever on TV. That would be so much easier to reconstruct scenes from the past. But
it's actually a good point, because we talked about documentaries before, where we always, the realism will be important still, but those documentaries, I'm sure you too, I've worked on a lot of documentaries, historical, that didn't have the money to do like reenactments, because it takes a lot of money to have costumes and locations and extras and stuff like that. Yeah, definitely. This is definitely something where you don't even need the coherence between the shots sometimes, right? Except for a couple of those. But because as scary as it is, I think people should should embrace it because it's definitely something that's not going to go away. And also, I think we are embracing it in a sense that we are running a couple of different initiatives that are not about generative images, but using AI as a creative tool to enhance things. So first of all, we're working on a new series of courses for MZ that are really leveraging AI in different fields. Together with our writer Masha Dekova, who's writing a lot about artificial intelligence, who's a filmmaker herself, we're working on actually 3 different courses now, with the first one, captions and subtitles with AI. Now, this is something that extremely cumbersome work, like transcribing video footage, sometimes translating it, and working with these subtitles. So we are really diving into this and looking at all the different NLEs, DaVinci, Premiere, and even Avid, to show how the captions workflow works, what comes out of it with the automatic transcriptions, how you fix the spelling mistakes, and how you feed it back in and translate it, and kind of really come up with a workflow to do that. That's one thing. But there's a couple other courses we're working on, which have to do with visual effects, like mapping out 3D environments and stuff like that, which is really stuff that usually you wouldn't do as a filmmaker, but if you're not a VFX artist, but what is with tools becoming much more easy, and that nothing to do with generative AI, right? Nothing. You're really still shooting and making your own images, but you're kind of enhancing them using the AI tools that are out there. And we call it the efficient filmmaker because it's really about efficiency and productivity, because not everything we make is art, or rather, I would say you want to focus on your art. You don't want to focus on transcribing videos or, like masking. We have a separate course about masking, which now with Magic Mask and Magnetic Mask and other tools has become much more easy. But a lot of people are not aware of those tools, what you can do with selective color grading and stuff like that. So we're really diving into this with separate mini courses that are guiding people through, and we will make sure that those courses keep being updated as the tools are being renewed. So if you are an MZ subscriber, you will always get the latest version, and you will always know exactly what's the tool to use for what purpose and so on. So that's our way of kind of showing, like, not everything about AI is about, it's not about replacing creativity, it's just really enhancing. And it's a big word, like it's almost like, it always reminds me about, 15 years ago when had DSLRs come along and people were like, oh, I'm never going to use a photo camera to film. And, like the tradition, it's like that. If you say, I'm never going to use AI, that's like saying I'm, I don't know, I'm never going to read a book, like it depends on the book. You don't have to.
I have one never say never.
Exactly, right? I mean, I'm also scared of generative AI and all those video tools and so on, but use the tools that you have at your disposal best for your work, because now is the time to learn those, and now is the time to kind of differentiate yourself from those who don't do that because they're just like scared and not looking at them. So that's all I can say. And also in that context, I just wanted to mention that there will be a Expo in New York in June, 17th and 18th of June. It's called the Bild Expo. And actually got a nice newsletter yesterday. Did you see that? A newsletter from our friends at the American Cinematographer. And look, they put my stupid face there next to a lot of much more renowned people. For example,
we don't say stupid face, we say face for radio.
My face for radio next to Ed Lackman on Orange Software, really amazing, and some other, and Shane Holbert and so on. So really cool. I'm gonna speak there on behalf of CineD, of course, about. It's called Ready Creator 1, and it's really talking about. It's a 45-minute talk, including a Q&A session at the end, about using AI tool to be more efficient and actually use it creatively. So a very positive outlook on the whole situation. And I'm working on that right now. But there's over 100 speakers there. It's a really, really cool educational event. And I really very much look forward to meeting a lot of those people in the audience there too. I think it's going to be great. It's free. It's in New York City in the Javits Center on June 7th and 18th. And it's happened once before. And actually, we heard so many good things about it afterwards that we actually reached out to B&H and just told them we want to be part of it, because it's, really, a lot of people were talking about this at trade shows too. What a great event it was. And not just a normal trade show, it's really an educational event. So register for free. And we'll put the link in the show notes also to our article and the sign up form. Yeah. Good. Where are we? We're still talking about AI.
I think we can move to the poll maybe.
Move to the poll first. Okay.
Yeah.
So, you want to talk about that?
Yeah. Everything that when we talk about cameras, that's always very interesting to people. So this time we really ask, what is the most innovative camera brand? And actually, it was quite nice to see that almost 450 people took the time to answer. And of course, what is innovation is a matter of maybe subjective thing, but we try to be a bit more like things that really are changing the industry. It's not about adding a button here and a lot there. It's more about fundamental stuff. And of course, we could remember maybe the EOS 5D Mark II from Canon. That's just one example. And maybe DJI Osmo Pocket 3, for example. There are many of those, yeah. But it's nice to see that also people are recognizing the innovation by companies. And we can clearly say that the big winner in this poll is Blackmagic Design, like 146 people thinking that they deserve the title here. Next is DJI with 59 votes. Then comes Sony, Panasonic, Arri, Fujifilm, Nikon Red, Canon, Sigma, OM System, Zcam, Leica Kinefinity, and even FreeFly is there. Yeah. So, of course, those on the lower end get very few votes, and I can understand in a way, in all honesty. It has nothing to do with how much we love the brand. That's one thing that we try to ask people, don't be brand loyal here. Just refer to innovation in general. So if you're still interested in this topic, why not come to the poll itself, vote. If you have anything to write, please comment also in the article, because some of the comments are simply interesting to see what people are thinking about brands and innovation. Yeah.
It's a broad question, of course, we are aware of that. So, what does innovation mean? But I think it's very interesting in general just to point out that two non-traditional camera manufacturers came out on top here. Blackmagic Design and DJI both don't originally come from making cameras. They started...
And also not Japanese. I mean, both are not Japanese manufacturers.
But in general, they are not, Blackmagic Design comes from the post-production industry and DJI really comes from the drones. So it's interesting that they are considered the most innovative camera companies, which makes sense, of course, because they try to make things differently to the existing ones, because they know it's a very covered field already, right? So but of course, none of those polls are representative in a sense that we didn't ask tens of thousands of people, but I think it gives a good sign of where our audience's head is in terms of where they think the next big thing will come from. Yeah.
Good.
Let's move on to some gear news. Now, one thing I wanted to point out, RØDE just pushed a firmware update for their wireless micro Bluetooth, wireless microphone. It's called...
What's the name of the...
It's very confusing. They have the wireless Go, then they have the wireless Pro and the wireless micro. Now, the micro is the one that connects to the smartphone. So it's really made for creators that are using the smartphone as a filming device. And
never say never.
Mm-hmm.
I'm joking. Of course, many people are now using smartphones for filmmaking.
I mean, it's very easy. And the cool thing is, well, so far, it also has a sender and receiver. But now, just by sheer firmware upgrade, they're enabling the app itself to be the receiver. So just via Bluetooth, you only need the sender. And that's really cool, because if you think about, you just need spontaneously just good audio and something from a person. You can just have the sender in your pocket now next to your smartphone and just put it on somebody, start the app, and can immediately shoot video without even having the receiver. So it's making it much more straightforward, actually.
Can you get your money back in case you bought the receiver?
I don't know. I don't even know if they sell it without the receiver, but they probably should now, because I think it includes 2 transmitters, I think, and the receiver. But anyway, so makes sense. It makes sense to upgrade your wireless micro as well. I wonder if they can also do the same. I think they should be able to do the same actually to the Wireless Go 2 and the Wireless Pro sender if you use it with a phone. And of course, that's also the next question. Cameras also have Bluetooth.
Exactly.
So why can't you just run it? I mean, maybe it's not connected to the audio circuitry or whatever, but if it is, it's nice to have, right?
Yeah, the last I know about Bluetooth in cameras that the manufacturers are not using the fastest chip, let's say. So there's always a certain delay, latency, and that's the problematic part here. Yeah. But it can be that the one that they're using in iPhone and such are just better, and because that's not considered to be a 100% professional tool, maybe the latency is kind of okay. So maybe that's the reason.
So sticking with wireless audio gear, Hollyland now formally launched the Hollyland LARK Max 2 wireless audio system. Now this is something we covered at NAB. If you didn't see that video, just check it out. And it's really something that is quite innovative. And actually since that interview, they've come up with a few new cool things. Well, first of all, it's a 32-bit float. Transmitter. I mean, it's usually, as with the others that do 32-bit, the 32-bit is actually only recorded inside the transmitter, not the receiver, because it cannot be recorded in camera, in most cameras anyway. So it's in the transmitter, so you have to kind of offload that audio from the transmitter. But the real innovation here is that apart from also having a receiving unit for a camera and a separate one for a phone, so you can use this with both, there is an optional accessory which allows you to wirelessly monitor the audio. So it's like a wireless Bluetooth headset. You don't have to use a cable. Now, the reason why we usually use a cable, of course, is because we have to connect it to the camera when the camera doesn't allow for wireless audio. So you might ask, is this actually connecting to the receiver, which is not great, because if you're only listening to what the receiver receives, you not necessarily hear what the camera records. So if the connection to the camera isn't proper, if the cable is out, you might actually think that you have good audio, but it's not actually recording in the camera. But they have a solution for that. There's an extra cable that is kind of giving a feedback from the camera. So you can be sure that you're actually listening to what the camera is recording, even though this is connected to the receiver. It's a very smart thing. It's not a really in-ear headphone kind of thing. It's kind of an over-ear. So it's like a little speaker on top of your ear that you're listening to. And I think it's a very convenient way for one-man bands to monitor audio, of course, to not have to use cables, because you can literally leave that on your ear while you're shooting, right? If you do a couple of interviews during a day, it's not going to be very disturbing, and you can use 1 or 2 of those ear units. I think it comes with 2, but it's fine if you just monitor one channel, you can just have it on one ear. That's very nice. And the other thing, they have an accessory that allows you to directly talk to the smart hot shoe in Sony cameras. So you don't need to use a cable for the receiver with Sony cameras. Now that is something that usually, I think we've only seen that, I think DJI has one too for the DJI mic. And other than that, it's only from Sony itself, right?
No. The other companies, I think Godox has one, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Ceremonic too?
Yeah, Ceremonic maybe not, but there are a few companies that are making Small Rig, I think, has one too. Yeah, that with direct contact to the hot show, the Sony hot show.
As far as we know, this works through reverse engineering. So I don't think this is something that Sony is licensing out, as far as we know. So I think take this with a grain of salt, this information. But it is of course great if you don't need to use a cable and can just do it like that. And latency seems to be quite low on this system too. So and actually what's also really new, they now have a version that has 4 senders. So you can have 1 receiver and 4 senders. I haven't seen any other solution. Like if you do a little talk round with a few people without having a sound mixer or whatever, you can just literally put 4 of those on the people.
4 people, 32-bit float.
I mean, I wonder what it does with the 2 channels in the camera. So it must mix it down, but still, you will still have 4 different channels recorded inside the transmitter. So you can still use the 32-bit inside the transmitters times 4 later on, which is great. And that's we'll actually review this unit. So I hope we'll receive it soon, and we'll check it out. And there's one downside though, which is the transmitters don't have a 3.5 millimeter jack to connect lav mic. It is only USB-C. So if you have a mic like that, you have to use a little adapter, which is of course not great, but I think it works because the transmitter is very small, which means also you can put it on people, even if you just use the transmitter without a wireless lav, it's kind of not very visible. And the logo, there's always a logo on those, unfortunately, but it's very small on this, it's not very disturbing like with some other brands. Good.
Next.
Let's move on. Mandy Walker, the director of photography of Elvis and Mulan and now most lately Snow White, which is going to be in cinemas soon, became ASC's first female president, which is really a watershed moment, because if you consider the ASC is now over 100 years old, it's the oldest cinematographer association in the world, has 471 members, and they don't disclose how many women are those, but I looked at the list. Guess how many? What's the percentage of
5%.
women?
5%. I mean, he just said that we even have to report about it.
Yeah, it's 8%.
8%. Okay.
And they luckily, I mean, added. Over the past few years, we've seen big efforts from them for more diversity in general, which is great. And but 8%, of course, is still incredibly low and needs to change. But I think it's a really good sign that they elected a woman and a very, very successful cinematographer at that as their president. So I'm very curious what's going to happen with the ASC over the next 2 years. I think usually their term is 2 years. Of course, it can be extended one time. But yeah, they decided for change because I think the predecessor, Shelby, what's his name? Shelby Johnson, I think he was president before, then became president again. So maybe he was not allowed to be elected again. But in any case, it's great that we see that they own, the president is elected by the members. And there's, 471 full members. And they recognize the need for change in this area. So it's really great. Yeah. Good. So let's see. I wrote a long article about her career and what that might mean for the future, and also pointed out the MZ courses that we have that are taught by ASC members, which is quite a few actually. Good. Let's point out a little pro tip for our databases. Now, many of you might know our databases. First of all, we have a camera database, a lens database, and a lens coverage tool. We collect a lot of data about all cameras. First of all, the lab test results, dynamic range, latitude, rolling shutter, but also a lot of tech specs from the cameras, the sensor sizes, and all the recording modes and codecs that we have and frame rates. And this is incredibly long. Like if you look at a camera like the
Panasonic S1 II.
Exactly. The Panasonic is notoriously the brand with the most options. Actually, I can show you here in our databases. If you click on our newly added S1 II here, and you have to log into the site to see all this, but you go to check recording modes and times, and then you expand how many there are. It's these. This is all the combinations of frame rates and resolutions that are there and codecs in just this one camera. I mean, look at this. It's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of options. So we have all that, which is very comprehensive for all the cameras that are relevant, basically. And if we do have a lab test result, it's also in here, and you will see also the link to the lab test. But on top of that, we also have the lens coverage tool. And in this tip that we just published, here, we're actually pointing out that you can see how the crop factor of any camera changes when you change the format. And I think a lot of people don't realize that we have this feature. And it's very, very useful because we know that a lot of cameras actually, like we mentioned, not just the FX2, when you change to 50 or 60p, but a lot of other cameras actually change and crop into their image when you change the resolution or frame rate. And you can just see all of that using our tool. I mean, here's a little animation of the different video crops in the Panasonic Lumix S1 II and how that changes. So yeah, just go check that out. Databases are freely available and fully available if you have a account on CineD. And I think we can wrap it up here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's still a lot to do today before when you see this is after the announcement, but
Johnnie looks tired because he didn't sleep because he edited his FX2 video.
Absolutely. There's much to do. Okay.
All right. Thanks for watching.
Thank you, guys.
Stay tuned to CineD, and also don't forget to give us a like, subscribe, leave a comment, write us to podcast@cined.com if you have any question or comment about this episode or anything else you want to know. And don't forget to give us a good rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. See you next week.
Bye.